Have you ever wondered if vampires are real? You might think they belong only to myths, movies, and Gothic novels, but history is filled with real-life accounts of vampire encounters. These are stories documented by eyewitnesses, government officials, and even scientists. Stories that have left people terrified and questioning reality. From bodies that refuse to decompose to terrifying attacks in the dead of night, today, we're diving into 5 of the most chilling real-life vampire encounters in history. The Shoemaker of Breslau, 1591. In the late 16th century, the town of Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, was gripped by terror. A well-known shoemaker had passed away under mysterious circumstances, but even in death, his presence lingered. Shortly after his burial, people began reporting strange occurrences. At night, they heard footsteps outside their homes, and some even claimed to see his ghostly figure wandering the streets. More disturbing were the unexplained deaths. Healthy individuals suddenly found dead in their beds, their bodies drained of color. Fear spread rapidly. The townspeople exhumed the shoemaker's body and discovered something shocking. His corpse was unnaturally well preserved, with fresh blood around his mouth. Panicked, they took drastic measures, staking the body through the heart and burning it to ashes. Did this shoemaker truly rise from the grave, or was it just a case of medieval superstition? The Prowler of Pentsch, 1592. 1 year later, in the small town of Pentsch, Poland, another terrifying case emerged. A deceased man whose name was lost to time was rumored to have returned from the dead. At first, villagers dismissed the claims, but then strange deaths began occurring. Animals were found dead, completely drained of blood. Soon after, villagers claimed to see a shadowy figure lurking near their homes at night. People became so fearful that they refused to leave their homes after dark. Determined to put an end to the horror, the villagers dug up the man's grave. To their shock, the body was intact, his skin soft, his nails and hair still growing. Clear signs of vampirism, according to the time's beliefs. They followed an old ritual to stop the supposed vampire. They severed the body's head, placed it between his legs, and buried him again under heavy stones. The strange occurrences stopped, but the town never forgot the horror they had lived through. The Peasant of Kisiljevo, 1725. One of the most famous vampire cases in history comes from Serbia, in the small village of Kisiljevo. A peasant named Petar Blagojevic died suddenly. Nothing seemed unusual at first, but in the days following his burial, 9 villagers died mysteriously, all claiming on their deathbeds that Petar had visited them in the night and strangled them. Fear and panic spread quickly, and soon the villagers demanded action. They dug up Petar's grave and found his body completely preserved, his mouth covered in fresh blood. Even government officials were present, documenting the bizarre scene. Following the region's traditions, the villagers drove a wooden stake through Petar's heart. According to witnesses, his body let out a loud groan, as if he were still alive. His corpse was then burned to ashes. This case is one of the first officially recorded vampire hunts, making it a key piece of vampire folklore. But Was it just a misunderstanding of natural decomposition, or did Petar truly return from the grave? The Mercy Brown Vampire Incident, 1892. America has had its own share of vampire legends, and one of the most chilling is the Mercy Brown case. In 1892, in Exeter, Rhode Island, George Brown lost his wife and 2 daughters to tuberculosis, which was then called consumption. His only surviving child, Edwin, was sick and on the brink of death. Desperate to save his son, George turned to superstition. At the time, people believed that a deceased family member could rise from the grave and drain the life from the living. So they dug up the bodies of his wife and daughters to check for signs of vampirism. To everyone's horror, Mercy Brown's body had hardly decomposed, despite being buried for months in the freezing winter. Her cheeks were still flushed and her heart contained fresh blood. Convinced she was the cause of Edwin's illness, they cut out her heart, burned it to ashes, and mixed it into a potion for Edwin to drink, believing it would cure him. Tragically, he died a few months later, but the case became one of the most famous vampire stories in American history. Many believe it was just a case of tuberculosis and the effects of cold preservation. But for the people of Exeter, the line between myth and reality was dangerously thin. The Vampire Burials of Poland, 17th century. In recent years, archaeologists in Poland have uncovered graves from the 17th century that suggest a deep fear of vampires among the people of the time. In one grave, they found a skeleton buried with a sickle placed over the neck, a practice meant to prevent the dead from rising. Another burial had a large stone wedged in the person's mouth, believed to keep them from biting others if they came back to life. One particularly haunting discovery involved a woman's remains. She had been buried with a padlock on her toe, a symbolic act meant to trap her spirit in the grave forever. Scientists suggest these measures were taken when the dead showed signs of decomposition abnormalities, such as bloating or blood seeping from the mouth, signs we now understand as part of natural decay. But back then, they were seen as evidence of vampirism. These findings proved that even centuries ago, the fear of the undead was very real. So, what do you think? Were these cases just the result of misunderstandings and superstition? Or is there something more to the vampire legends that haunt our history? One thing is certain. For centuries, people have truly believed in vampires. These stories have shaped cultures, fueled fears, and even influenced medical practices. And while we may never have definitive proof of their existence, the question remains: could vampires still be lurking among us? Let me know your thought in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into real-life vampire encounters, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eerie stories from the dark side. Thanks for watching and stay safe, especially after dark.